For today's episode of Growing Pains, we'll be talking about eating disorders with psychotherapist and life coach Emma Hogg, also the founder of A Life I Choose. Before heading into it, I just want to mention that we do mention topics such as self-harm and eating disorders, which might be triggering for some people.
We're filming this episode because we realized that eating disorders might be more common than some of us might think. So much so that you've even mentioned to us that yourself, you had some struggles as well growing up within that field before becoming a psychotherapist. What was that like for you growing up?
So my struggles with food started when I was about 13 years old.
Okay.
And it was quite a journey. So what was it like for me? Hard. Very, very, very hard. I'd say it was probably the hardest period of my life. And I've been through a few tough periods.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a teen or in your early 20s, you're on the verge, of not on the verge, but you're stepping out of childhood and you're slowly entering into adulthood. It's a very confusing time for anyone. And so it was very challenging. Would you like me to go into my experience, how it started?
What were the main struggles that you felt you faced throughout that period?
So it started with okay, so I just need to clarify that this is opening my pain box, right? This is my box of pain. Okay, that I've worked on a lot, and obviously I'm in a totally different space. But when I open it up, it still is that box of pain for me.
Okay.
So it's not something that I think about often, and it's not something that I like to think about often. But I have a lot of respect for you guys, and when I was asked to come, obviously I was super happy to do so, and I'm super happy to share. So you can ask me anything, and at the same time, don't be surprised if I'm a little bit what's the word? Working through it as I talk.
But that's completely normal, because even though it's been a while, it's still, the emotion would still be there. It's still difficult to talk
I think it's
about.
just that thing that I haven't looked at for a long time. So I have to unpack it again. I have to open it up. I haven't thought about it for so long. And I feel like I'm such a different human being now to the one I was then that I have to remember. So it started with, I need to remember, with me sort of pinching at myself, sort of grabbing myself. I'm feeling there's too much of me, and I need to cut it down. And I remember having sort of images of actually being able to cut my fat off, kind of thing. I wasn't I wasn't big, but in my head I was too big. And I remember watching MTV. We didn't have Instagram and stuff, obviously, back then. I remember watching MTV and just seeing these very skinny women. And I remember I used to look at them and I used to say, I want to be like that. I want to be like that. And I slowly started to eliminate what I would eat. Or if I didn't eliminate it, I would throw it up. And it's sort of spiraled out of control, I suppose. I ended up very underweight. I was about 17 kilograms underweight.
Wow.
I was very close to, at that point, you're close to death. You're walking on the tether line, and my heart rate slowed down. I lost a lot of hair. My period stopped. It was very serious and extremely stressful for my parents. So it was pretty intense.
Sorry to stop you, but in that moment where you were sort of seeing the effects of it, how would you sort of cope with that in the moment? How would you feel in the moment? Because you're seeing the effects of it, but you're still struggling mentally with it, I'm assuming. So how was it in that moment?
It's a very interesting question, because I didn't know what the hell was going on.
It's true.
I didn't understand it. I didn't even identify, this is an eating disorder. I had heard about anorexia a little bit, but in my head I was how stupid. Why would you stop eating, So I didn't even think oh, this is what I have. For me, it was just something I did in secret because I didn't want anyone to get in my way. And I was on a mission. I was going to get as skinny as I could possibly get.
And I feel like you only realize how bad it is until you recover, and like maybe after you actually go through it, because in the moment must be so overwhelming as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think you only realize how bad it was when you recover, because even when I was at my worst,
You're sort of blinded by like what you want.
yes, and not really understanding it either. Like, why do I want this? Why can't I eat? You know, like people would get really frustrated with me and be like, just eat.
It's true.
And now as the adult and the recovered adult, I get that frustration when I'm working with a client or something, you know, sometimes like that frustration will pop into my head. But I also remember what it was like to be the person with the struggles.
And when it comes to that struggle, if you don't mind me just delving a bit deeper into that, when it comes to your relationship with food, because obviously you're looking at the kind of the aesthetic that you want to achieve, but when it came to actually when you did eat, did you feel shame when you were eating? What was your relationship with food
Big
like?
time. And to be honest, you just said something really interesting, because it went beyond the aesthetic, because I went way past the aesthetic. I got to the point where I was so ugly. I was so skinny, like my bones were sticking out, like everything. Like it wasn't even about the aesthetic at that point. It was like, the thing is that anorexia goes so much deeper. It's not about aesthetic. It's not about food.
It's almost like an addiction to a certain extent.
It goes beyond. You're
It's
right. It is an addiction, but it goes beyond. It is. Look, there are different types of anorexia, and people experience at different degrees. Okay, so like the clients I work with who have it, I will not work with severe cases like I was. I don't find it fun. In all honesty, from a selfish point of view, I don't find it fun, and it's too triggering for me. Like but I can work with it when it's not severe. When we're kind of nipping it in the bud, that I can do. But when it's severe, I mean, if you think about it, anorexia is I deny my need for food, which also then cuts off my libido, which is my life force. So it's a commitment to dying, basically. It's a commitment to slow death, whether the person is conscious of it or not.
And most of the time, I'm assuming the person wouldn't be conscious of it.
No, typically, unless they've done a lot of work on themselves and they have some kind of awareness. But the thing is that when you're in a state of starvation, you're in such a bad state of survival that you can't think properly. So it's very dangerous. So I am not a specialist when it comes to eating disorders. I can't go into all of that with you. I can speak about my experience. But this is the thing that people need to understand about eating disorders, is that it's not about the food, it's not about the looks, it's that there is deep trauma that the person has not had the resources to heal, to be able to heal from it, to be able to make sense of it, to be able to integrate so that they can move past it. They are stuck. They're punishing themselves for it. They're experiencing deep, deep shame. And they're trying to disappear because it's just way too painful.
And is it ever enough? Is there I know you said it goes beyond aesthetic, but is there a goal, or like is there a weight or an aesthetic that you can achieve where and then you say, okay, this is good, I can just maintain this weight? Or does that almost kind of make you want to continue to,
I think for some people, sure. I think so. Because not everybody is at that level of shame where they have to self-destruct. This is what I look for in clients. I say, okay, is this person on a mission to self-destruct? Or is this person dealing with issues of self-worth, but at their core, they know they're lovable and they know they want to get better. It's just that they're stuck in a sort of a negative pattern at this point in time. that's one thing. But if this person is on a mission to self-destruct, that's a whole other story.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where it can get severe.
That's where it can get really dangerous.
And how can a person going through this find the resources to get out of it and recover? Because that in itself is quite a long journey, and it can be very painful in itself.
So I think what's great is that in this day and age, we have so much access to different places. I mean, there are places in Malta, like there's a home that you can go to. I used to volunteer there. I don't know if it's still running. I have no idea. But there's therapists. There are therapists who are specialized in eating disorders. So there's lots of resources. There's books. There's people who've been through it. I'm sure there are podcasts. I'm sure there's lots of different things. But what I would suggest is like definitely therapy. Do therapy. And so in some cases medication is helpful because the starvation is so bad that the chemical imbalance of the brain is just too off. Like that, even if you do your best, it's you need that help. You need that like just little boost.
And it's become, well, not it has become, it's very common. I read this statistic. I listened to a podcast that gave me the statistic on the way to the office today that basically said that anorexia was discovered as early as the 1600s, if not before. So we saw it back then. And it was just as prevalent then as it is now. So despite us thinking that social media could play a massive part of it, it actually shows that it is innately biological as well. And that obviously kind of leads me to say that it, for that reason, it was common and it remains common. As a psychotherapist, like, do you see this a lot in your career with your clients?
I think that I attract a different kind of client because my work is very much about thriving. It's very much about like claiming your life, owning responsibility for your life, and taking it where you want to go.
Okay.
So my clients are very much high achievers and people who just want to create like a phenomenal experience of life. They want to love their life. So I don't get too many clients who are struggling with eating disorders, but I do work with some. Some of them, they do love their lives and they do want to create a phenomenal experience, but they have this lingering from their past and it's something that they're still working on, or it's something that came up recently and it's a part of their healing journey. Because in order to create a life that is on your terms, you need to believe that you are worthy of that. You need to believe that you are worthy, you are capable of creating it, and that you are worthy of receiving it. Because ultimately it's a co-creation with the universe. You don't do it all by yourself. You do it by setting your intentions, you do it by taking action, but it's also about believing you're worthy of receiving. The thing about eating disorders is that the leading emotional state that a person with an eating disorder experiences is shame. What is shame? Shame is there is something wrong with me. I am broken. I am fucked up. I am not enough. It's very different to guilt. Guilt is I did something wrong. I did something bad. If I did something bad, but I am worthy, I can correct that. I can learn from that mistake.
But if there is shame and it's deep-rooted, then...
Exactly. If I am bad, what do I do about that? What do I do? Go into the shower and suddenly I'm better? Like, that's really deep-rooted. And that typically stems from trauma, whether it was a drip-drop trauma or a big impact trauma. So there needs to be healing around this shame.
It's more like tackling the inner issue rather than the issue that came with it, because you could say that the eating disorder is a byproduct of the internal shame that you feel.
Sure.
So in that case, if you target the actual the inner issue in that sense, then I guess it will help you obviously reduce the shame, which will kind of
Bingo, you're on it. In fact,
Nice.
you know, it's similar to working with people who cut themselves, right? If a person comes, you know, as a therapist, a person comes to you and they're cutting themselves, you're not going to be focusing totally on the cutting. You might refer to it here and there.
But you'll focus on where it stems from, I'm assuming.
Exactly. You want to go to, okay, what makes you think that you need punishment? Like, what makes you think that you deserve this pain? Or what is it a release for you? Like, what does it feel like? You know, you have to be careful as a therapist that you're not interpreting too much. You need to go into what is this experience for you?
Yeah.
You tell me.
Yeah, understood. Is it always a deep-rooted issue? Because one thing that I've been noticing is that there's this diet culture, right, of people that want to reach a certain aesthetic goal. They start, for example, calorie counting. They start, you know, putting that inch tape around their waist, and they start seeing that go down, maybe weighing themselves.
And it's become so normalized. Like, people suggest calorie counting to you, and some people can deal with it and can calorie count and still be healthy and not end up at a place where it's dangerous for them. But for some people, it's just straight up a bit dangerous for them because they might spiral. And I feel like that
Like
leads
if summer is coming up and we want to get in shape, I think the first thing that a lot of us do is flick on a YouTube video and see, like, how am I going to get into shape, into my summer body within the next 2 to 3 months. And the first thing that you're going to see recommended is stay at a calorie deficit, count your calories. And a lot of people, they become obsessed with this routine, with this, it becomes somewhat of a ritual. Like, if you're calorie counting on a day-to-day basis and you don't want to skip 2,000 calories in a day, I have to remain within a 500 calorie window. What's that going to happen when that one day on a Friday night, on a Saturday night, you have an extra meal? You know what I mean?
Then that shame comes in.
And anxiety, because at that point you're scared. Then to take that extra meal, you're going outside of your comfort zone.
And it's almost like you would think, as a person that is dieting, that if you eat a meal, you have a cheat meal or something of the sort. It's like, I screwed everything up. You know, this ruined everything. I'm gonna start gaining weight again, like, and it becomes a serious obsession. I think, especially in a country like Malta, where it's always in the summer period is like 6 months long. It's always sunny. Everyone's at the beach. You know what I mean? And then you're uncomfortable with your body and the way
And I think
you
a
look.
lot of people don't even realize when it gets bad, because if all of the people around you, if your group of friends are all doing the same thing, if you're all counting your calories and you're all dieting and doing this, you think it's normal. You think, yes, I'm starving, but so is everyone else. Like, it's fine.
True.
And I feel like that's where sometimes it can go very wrong, because you don't even realize how bad it is.
What you're talking about is very important. You know, you're talking about this element of wanting to fit in, essentially. You know, I want to go to the beach and I want to be good enough.
Yeah.
And you're speaking about, you know, kind of it's normal. It's like when you grow up in a family where they drink every day. When you start reaching for alcohol to numb your pain, it's normal. You don't think there's an issue with it. So I assume that's the reason that you're putting out this podcast, is because you want to help, right?
Yeah.
You want anyone who's experiencing it to have kind of have a way to cope. So where the work really needs to go is on our self-worth, right? And the thing is, we live in a bizarre world. It's a bizarre world. You know, we open up Instagram and it's just constant, like, you need this to be lovable and you need this to be lovable. And if you don't look like this, then you're not lovable. Before it was magazines and MTV, and in the 1600s it was who you married and whatever.
Exactly.
You know, there was always
something.
There's always this kind of hierarchy and this like kind of rush to the top and this wanting to be like revered and respected and to be better in some sense. I think survivally, there's this deep belief, and I think there's some truth to it as well, that kind of the more sort of respected you are, the more resources you'll have access to, and if you have more resources, then you're more likely to survive. So within us, there's always this like anxiety, which makes us do things like spend money on cosmetic surgery or the coolest shoes or whatever in order to appear like we're one of the top. And I don't think I don't think this is bad per se. Like, I think that you can play the game so long as you know that deep down you are worthy and you are lovable, so long as you don't lose yourself to the game and it doesn't become all about the game, you know, because in the same way that somebody can calorie count and can like throw up their food and so on and so forth, someone else can be buying Dolce & Gabbana, Chanel, like can't leave the house without wearing, you know, head to toe. It's the same thing, you know, it's just that deep down there is this, am I lovable? Am I good enough? Am I worthy?
And I guess that makes people focus a lot on the external. So, for example, if I had to speak about like my experience, it's always as though I have the next goal of what I want to achieve on like an aesthetic basis. So I remember I was unhappy with my teeth, for example. I said, okay, when I fix my teeth, then I'm gonna be happy. I'm gonna be handsome, you know. And
you
I
always
did that.
look for the next thing that you can fix.
And I'm like, I should grow out my hair. Like I'm like, okay, maybe I should lose some weight now. Maybe I should start going to the gym. Maybe I should start, you know, gaining muscle. And realistically, there isn't that one level that you're going to reach, that perfect aesthetic that you want. It's never going to be there, because if you're just focusing on the next thing, then I guess it's showing that, like you said, no, if you don't have that inner belief in yourself, you're going to focus on these external things to give you the validity, because it's going to make other people find you attractive, for example, and that validates you. It makes you feel good for a couple of hours, for a day, you know, but then you spiral back into the same problem of the lack of self-worth, at least to yourself.
The thing is that we all have the need for growth. So your want to constantly improve is normal. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, so I'm not sort of saying, oh, we should all let go of this want for, I don't know,
That's
success
unrealistic,
or whatever. Like, no, like, you know, I work with high achievers. A lot of that is like, okay, what's your next target? Like, what's your next goal? You know, so, and how are we going to let go of the limiting belief in order for you to be able to keep moving forward and get there? That's a big deal. So I'm not saying like, oh, we should let go and we should all just kind of like sit and be in Zen all the time. Like, it's not possible. You need to constantly be growing. You need to constantly be putting yourself out of your comfort zone, because if you don't, you will make your comfort zone really uncomfortable by becoming very anxious. Anxiety, repeated anxiety, is unfulfilled potential. When you are challenging yourself to grow in the way that is true for you, because the way you want to grow, the way Naomi wants to grow, the way I want to grow is different. We are different human beings. We came to this planet for a different reason. You're so sweet. It's soul is really like, I just see your eyes just like, yes.
And then you're slapping, you're hitting us with facts.
But we came to this planet for a different reason, right? So I need to be fulfilling my potential. And when I don't, and I limit myself, my soul feels that. So then I have all of this like energy that's not going anywhere. It's not going to where I need it to go. It's stuck. So then I start to experience repeated anxiety, worrying thoughts, sadness, a lack of fulfillment, judgment towards others who are doing what I want to be doing or what I perceive I should be doing, jealousy, so on and so forth. It's a very negative space to be in. It's not pleasant.
It's a vicious cycle, almost.
Exactly. You can get stuck there. So we need to be growing. So we need to be pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zone. So the growth matters. And we need to do it from a space where we trust deep in our souls that we are lovable. That even if the people who we love the most betray us or abandon us, that I will still have my back. I might doubt myself, I might go through a dark period, but ultimately, I love myself more than anything. And that doesn't mean that I like everything that I do. It doesn't mean that I think that, like, you know, my shit don't stink kind of thing. Like, you know, like,
It's also like self-respect a bit as well. Sort of you respect yourself and you love yourself, and that sort of stays throughout life.
yes. And if I love myself, like if I believe I'm worthy of love, then I can own my mistakes. I can be like, I messed up there, and apologize and own for it, and work on breaking that pattern, on not doing it again, on doing something better. But if I can't, because I'm too scared that, you know, if I own a mistake, then that means I'm not good enough, then I can't grow, I can't learn. I'm going to keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. So ultimately, having a good relationship with oneself is the core. It's the base of everything.
Literally.
Your relationship with other people,
Literally,
your ability to earn money, your ability to progress in life, everything.
And if you don't mind, I want to go back a bit to what we mentioned earlier about recovery. Because when you're stuck in such a state where maybe you don't love yourself or you're just stuck in this vicious cycle, how do you get yourself out of there? Like for you, in your experience, what was recovery like? How did you sort of start it? Because even making that first step must be so difficult.
So the beginning of my recovery was very sort of imposed upon me because I have very good parents. So this was at a time when therapy was not cool. And my parents sent me to therapy, even against so many people's advice. They sent me to therapy, and I'm eternally grateful to them for that. And they had me hospitalized whenever I needed to be hospitalized. And they were, you know, they did what parents needed to do, which was not what I wanted them to do. They were not my friends, they were my parents.
How did it feel in that moment? Because in the moment, I guess it feels like they're going against you to a certain extent.
For sure.
How did it feel?
I mean, you hate them, sometimes, but you like if your kids tell you, I hate you, I think you're probably doing something right, because you need to you need to set the boundary as the parent. When the child has too much freedom, the child goes wild. The child, if they don't have enough life experience to set their own boundaries. So I'm very grateful to my parents that they did set those boundaries, and they did send me to therapy, and they did hospitalize me whenever they needed to, because that was like, okay, survival needs taken care of. Otherwise, I would probably be dead. They saved me.
That's true.
Then my recovery sort of came in increments. I would say there were 3 years where I was just sort of in survival. Sorry. And then I guess when I was 18, I fell in love, and I think the guy helped me to believe that I was lovable on some level, and that was like a good start. But then when I was 24, I went into a big depression again, and I hid it from everyone, and that was when my recovery really, really, really started.
Yes, sure.
Because I did so much.
That's crazy, because that's 11 years after it started, because you mentioned it started when you were 13. So that's crazy, like thinking of how long it takes.
But from 16 onwards, I wasn't struggling with an eating disorder kind of thing. It wasn't through my eating, but the work on myself, that self-worth, that self-love, that I'd say I really started to heal when I was 24, and I was studying to become a therapist. Like, I had to do so much of my own inner work, you know, because you're on the journey now. Like that, like it was, for me, it was transformative. And from there, it's been up ever since. Like my life has been up ever since.
And I mean, that goes to show, what you said earlier, that if you have an eating disorder, it's not just as plain as simple as, oh, okay, this person has an eating disorder. It's not black on white, no? If you have something a bit more, something that's troubling you internally, that's going to translate in the future. Like at 24, you went through a depression following your struggles with an eating disorder at 13. Do you think that could be a product of maybe when you were 30, not directly focusing on yourself and focusing more at the issue at hand? Do you think?
Yes, I think so. That's a good question. I think I was too guarded. I was too fearful that if I expressed what I had actually been through, that I would be rejected, even by my therapist. You know, that's the shame. So it took me until I was 24 to make peace with what I had experienced in my childhood, those traumatic experiences, and that I was enough, and it was okay, and it wasn't all my fault, and you know, I could forgive myself.
I want to ask a bit of a question about self-diagnosis, because I feel like it creates sometimes more of a problem than something should be, because
Okay.
you're almost psychoanalyzing yourself. So if you occasionally enjoy some midnight cheese, you know what I mean? Or you like binge eating a little bit. I know people like myself, I sometimes on a Saturday night, you're kidding me, I go nuts binge
Jill is
eating. Hafna. But if you self-diagnose yourself and say, for example, yeah, I'm binge eating, so I must have an element of an eating disorder. Do you think that self-diagnosis, like how could that self-diagnosis cause more turmoil?
That's an interesting question.
Like there are so many different levels to it as well, like how it affects the person, like self-diagnosing and people surrounding the person, because it affects the, as in, correct me if I'm wrong, but it can be dangerous to the person itself, and also if they mention something to someone that actually does have an eating disorder, it might cause more danger there, more damage there.
It's the same thing with, for example, depression, OCD, anxiety. These are all areas where we see a lot of self-diagnosis, because people would research on YouTube, they'd read the articles and they'd say, okay, this applies to me, this applies to me, this applies to me. So, okay, if I have these symptoms, then I must have this problem. And that obviously would come in with more shame, and it would make the situation, to put it simply, it would make it bigger than it is.
It can, for sure. I think the word diagnosis is important to talk about here, because in fact in Gestalt psychotherapy you'll see that we diagnose in a very different way. It's not like, okay, anorexia nervosa or whatever.
Exactly.
You're going to be looking at the context, like so on and so forth. I won't go into detail here because it's boring for the listeners. But my point is, like, a diagnosis can be empowering or it can be disempowering depending on how it's delivered.
If you notice like someone around you, like a friend struggling with an eating disorder or with body dysmorphia, etc., what approach should you take? Because I think usually these type of people, when they're struggling, they tend to isolate themselves. So what can you even do? Sometimes it's difficult because it's like everything you say is wrong.
It is difficult, it's true, it's very challenging. And something to really keep in mind here is the paradoxical theory of change. So the paradoxical theory of change states that the more I push you to do something, the more you're going to push back. Okay, so, and this is especially true with people who have eating disorders. They need to protect it, because ultimately we're speaking about a coping mechanism. We're speaking about this person has been through immense trauma, and trauma, let's define trauma, floor swept out from underneath you, feeling completely vulnerable, exposed. And it's not even about the traumatic experience itself, it's about, did you have the support to recover from that trauma? If you didn't, then you're going to get stuck, and it's going to be really difficult. But if you did have the support, then you can move on. You won't get stuck in one of these coping mechanisms. If you get stuck, the coping mechanism is going to come up to protect you from this very dangerous world. Sorry.
No.
So the last thing you want to do as a friend or a parent is go in and try to remove the coping mechanism, because this will make the person just push you away completely, like they need it. So you need to, even though the eating disorder like really irritates you, and perhaps your daughter or your best friend is just like driving you nuts at the moment because they won't just eat a freaking piece of toast, and it might seem completely irrational, you need to do your very best to remove your judgment and step into a space of compassion. Like, just make space for it. And as a parent, you might be freaking out at this point and thinking like, how can I make space for it? Like, my kid could die. This is crazy, you know? I can't just let this happen. And no, I agree, you can't let it happen. If your kid needs medication, if they need medical intervention, get it, you know? If they're dehydrated, take them to hospital, like, do what you need to do to save them. At the same time, it's funny, I have a toddler. So it's very interesting for me to witness this this psychological need for freedom emerging in him. You know, when a baby is born, there's confluence between the mother and the child. I intuit what he needed. I intuited what he needed by sensing him, because he came from me. So I would feel him and I would tune into him. Now it's been 2.5 years since we separated bodies, and he's had more independence, and he walks and he talks and he says, bye-bye, mama, you know, and everything. And this need for psychological freedom has emerged. Fantastic. But it also comes with challenge.
Of course.
Because now I say it's time to brush your teeth. He throws his toothbrush on the floor. What you gonna do about it, you know? I say don't pee in your pants, and he pees in his pants. You know?
Same, man. Careful what you ask me not to do.
So sometimes when you're working with an eating disorder, it's very similar. You have this strong need for psychological freedom coming out, emerging, and you need to respect it. I know that we all have survival instinct. So this is why I look for, are they on a path to not psychological, to destruction or not? Because even when they are on a path to destruction, there still is this survival instinct that kicks in. And when you give a person the space that they need for healing, the unconditional love, the compassion, and the boundaries, because that is a part of love, when they understand that you love them and you encourage them to love themselves, hopefully, their survival instinct will kick in enough to gradually improve. And it is a slow process.
Yes. I feel like that's like a very important point you just mentioned, how it is a slow process. So even if you're seeing someone struggle with it, you need to realize that they can't change like from day to night, like overnight like that. It's a slow process that you sort of need to be there with them for and love them throughout.
And also, I really want to make this clear. It's also not within your control. You can give a person so much love and so much understanding, and you can place boundaries, and you can still lose that person. It's not always in your it's not in your control, you know. You can do your best, but ultimately, like, we come to this planet for different reasons, and some of us come to struggle. You know, so a lot of love and compassion for the person and the boundaries. You know, listen, you know, you get to a certain weight and you're going to hospital, you know, that's a necessity. And also a lot of love and compassion for yourself, because dealing with this kind of situation, especially if it's severe, it's incredibly stressful. Incredibly stressful. Imagine. So yes, a lot of love and compassion for yourself. Get your self-support. Get your self-support. Yeah, big time.